Well, real estate rock stars wanting to be a rock and roller, welcome back. This is session 2, where we try to, in about 30 odd minutes or so, sometimes a bit longer, just try to get some discussion going and some information going on how you can either maintain, rejig, or improve your performance out there inside the real estate space. Of course, this is for high-end performers. You've already made the decision that you want to be the best you can be, or that you've now gone or at the point where you just want to rejuvenate or just get everything sort of facilitating that lifestyle. To my mind, that's probably the best space that you can possibly be in. As we talked about last week, you know, where this kind of signifies, definitely in Australia right now, the end of the financial year. So this is just a new beginning. I know that tomorrow earmarks it. If you haven't done something about that, if you didn't do anything at the beginning of the calendar year, one thing I learned a long time ago, never say never, and it's never too late. It's never too late to make a start. One of my most favorite things that I said to a person many years ago who actually wanted to be a doctor, was working in real estate, and said the reason that they got into real estate is because it just seemed like something they could do relatively quickly, make the change, and be earning good money in a short space of time. And I thought, well, of course you can. And this is a follow on from last week. And I said, you know, but I've always recognized that you'll only ever make money at something, you know, provided you can answer those two questions we talked about last week. The first, of course, is, am I good at this? And the second, and I believe the most important, is, do I love it? If push came to shove, would I do this for a minimal amount of money just because it just is completely fulfilling? It makes me feel good. And for me, real estate's always been in that space, in that it's a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle I absolutely enjoy. I just don't see the demarcation between it and work, you know. Anyway, this chap said that he wanted to be a doctor. And I just said, well, what's in front of you to be a doctor? And he started to go on with the study. And from memory, I think we worked out it was going to take somewhere between 7 and 9 years. And at the time, this chap was like in his early 30s. And I said, okay, so in 7 years' time, let's say, how old will you be if you don't do it? And he said, I'd be 40. And I said, and if you do decide to do it in 7 years' time, how old will you be? He said, same age, it'd be 39. I said, so there's no difference. The only real difference is whether or not you decide to make that change and go ahead and do it. And thankfully he did. Won't say who it is. It's not sure that he wants the whole world knowing that, you know, he went from real estate agent to becoming a doctor. I think that's out there. Anyway, last week when we talked about this, we said that you've got to be very clear on your destination. You need to understand your why. If the why is big enough, the how will come. You know, all of the things that you need to do to get yourself into a space where this becomes, where you get your mojo back. You know, for a lot of us, especially with this COVID stuff, it kind of knocks that mojo thing for 6. And, you know, you're just like, oh, not again. I mean, even as little as recently as the last couple of weeks, I'm seeing in Australia, at least, we've had lockdowns occurring at a rapid rate. The greater Sydney region, which is where I live, has been closed up. And then the same sort of thing occurred, you know, just yesterday up in Brisbane, the Western states. Those of you that are joining us from the Western states, you know, you guys are now seeing lockdowns occurring regularly. And, you know, I mean, look, there's a couple of ways that you can look at this. And I've got to put this in perspective for everyone so that hopefully this will inspire you to look at things the right way. You see, I always believe no matter what's thrown at you, it's a matter of perspective. And when I look at the real estate space right now, I say, well, you can either look at this as adversity or you can look inside it for the opportunity. And this takes me all the way back to the late 80s, not long after I'd been in real estate, about at 12 months or so. And my introduction to the real estate business was in a mad boom. You know, it was relatively easy to sell properties. It didn't take me that long to figure out that listing was where it was at. And, you know, prices were rising almost weekly as properties were selling. Does this sound familiar, people? And, you know, property prices were going up and people just thought it was never going to end. And in those days, despite the fact that interest rates were at an all-time high, that it was just blown out of proportion. And I thought it would go on forever. Then almost overnight, the October stock market crash of 88 or 89, I think it was, led the Prime Minister at that stage to turn around and say, or the Treasurer, I should say, it's official, Australia is in a deep recession. This was plastered all over the pages of the newspapers. And I'll never forget, I can recollect it. It's almost like it happened yesterday. I walked into the real estate office and my colleagues, my sales team, were beside themselves with grief. They had literally given up. They sat around and said, well, we're not going to be able to sell anything. Even the deals we've got on the board right now, they're most likely going to crash and nobody's going to want to buy. Now, for me, it's always paradox. It's looking at things in the opposite. And I ask you to write this down if you're taking notes, or at least take it on board. Hopefully you'll never forget it. Every time I've been confronted with a challenge or a problem in the real estate profession, the first place I look for a solution is typically in paradox. I look at the opposite, or I look at it from the perspective that's completely completely polarized at opposite ends, completely contrasted to the way in which others might be looking at it. So in this instance, I was walking in, my team were hanging their heads saying nobody's going to want to buy. And for me, it was just like, shit, how many people are going to want to sell? And got to be honest, the light just went on and I looked at it the right way. And of course, the rest was history, because for me, that marked the period where I took on more listings than I ever had. I moved into the space of double-figure listings, certainly by the early 90s. By 1991, I was the #1 salesperson in the First National Group, and I never looked back. Double-figure listings, double-figure sales, because I just recognized the opportunity that was there. It's the same with what's going on with the fallout of COVID on an almost daily basis, where you're seeing agents confronted with lockdowns, with different ways of doing business. And as I said, it just settles down and people learn to get around the obstacles. This is the human condition. This is what we do. So you can choose to sit back and wait for the problem to resolve itself, or you can run at it. You can run at it at 100 miles an hour and say, well, where's the opportunity in this? So for my mind, I look at it and I go, well, this has got to earmark, especially those that are suffering lockdowns and the like. Surely this is an opportunity for you to then start working one-on-one with buyers, learning how to qualify them by virtue of the fact that they're going to be going out to inspections with you during lockdowns. This could only mean that they are qualified. Having said that, means that you are going to be, closer to making sales once you learn those skills around matching. Anyway, that wasn't the main subject matter of today, but it's just something that I ask you to look at. If it's like when I say to salespeople, they look at me and they go, what do I do in this situation? How do I get people to get on top with this? And you'll hear me talk about this as we go through some of the stuff in terms of evaluation. And I say, well, look, take a look at your business card. What does it say there? It says salesperson. Why don't you start selling? Salespeople are optimistic. We're the perpetual optimists. The glass is always half full. It's never half empty. And how you choose to communicate this to people around you is largely going to determine the outcomes and how cards are dealt to you. Anyway, on the last occasion we got into this, I started to talk about, importantly, so Daisy, oops, get up here. I started to talk about, importantly, the 4 factors. Once you've actually figured out where it is you want to go, how you actually put yourself in a position to get there and get there really comfortably. I mean, more comfortably than you ever have before. And I started to talk about what I call the 4 E's that you need to embrace as you start to move into the space of being a high performance real estate sales professional. Yeah, or as I call it, the 3 P's: peak performance. Yep, peak performance professionalism, a peak performance pro, if you like. The first thing you're going to do is evaluate. You've got to evaluate your capacity, but you also have to evaluate your capacity in terms of what you have a propensity to be good at and leverage well, as opposed to the things that you might be struggling with. Once you've evaluated that, we're going to walk you through that this morning to start to expand it and explain how it all works. You can then move into the space of elimination. You can start to take out of play the very things that are impeding you or blocking you from not just fulfilling your capacity, but also that are preventing from making the profession that you've chosen to be involved in a complete pleasure. And to me, that's equally as important inside this space. So I say, once we've eliminated some of those things, once we evaluate it, eliminate those things that are getting in the way, we can then start to elevate. We can focus on the things, the very things, in terms of not just prioritization, but in actual on a daily basis as we're discharging our tasks, ensuring that they are highly productive and everything we do is linked toward productivity. And then you can emancipate. You can actually emancipate and move into the space of having a career lifestyle, the envy of most people that are out there. So often I hear people in the real estate sales profession talk about the fact that the business we're in is tough. Tough, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I'm even sitting here today thinking, I'm in the bunker. I've got everything that I want around me, and basically the profession, I have not been denied an income or doing work that I just don't love. I just don't want it to end. I just don't understand. I don't even understand retirement when I start to think about this. So let's just have a look at evaluation. Let's start to figure out where those blockages are. And we've done this many, many times inside of the space of Real Estate Rockstar. Even if you go there, even though we're about to update it and put it in place, but if you jump onto realestaterockstar.com.au or even go in via the listandsell.com, listandSell.com.au, if you go via that site and just go to Rockstar on the drop down boxes, and you go in and you look at the application. Now the 3 questions, there's one that is missing, which is probably the most important for me, and it does need to be updated. But we've always asked these 4 questions, and this is the time for you to start self-evaluating those things within yourself. And if you do run this self-evaluation, you start to reach an understanding of how it is, how you function, and then how to exploit that functionality so that you get a maximum output. Yep. So the first thing that we ask is, what are the tasks that you perform as a real estate agent that you just love? What do you enjoy? and you wouldn't want anyone else to do for you. I mean, I like to express it in the sense that if I had to, I would do this for nothing. I love it that much. I mean, even as I got toward retirement, no matter who I was decided to live with or spend my life with, I'd still want to get up each day and say, you know what, I'm just going to go and get involved in this stuff because I just love it to death. Now, hopefully for you, in the space of a real estate rock star, and I've got to tell you, as a rock and roller, you've got to face some facts on this. Top of this list needs to be that you love listing presentations. If you don't love listing presentations and it's only because you lack confidence in them, well, that's a different issue. But if you actually love the listing presentation, if you love engaging people, if you love winning the business, then to me, that needs to figure somewhere at the top of the list. Well, not somewhere, it needs to be top of the list. The next thing for me has always been negotiating deals. I absolutely love the space where I've got two parties, a property buyer, an active property seller, and they're apart in their views. You know, the seller wants more money, might be unreasonable otherwise, who knows, but the seller is kind of stuck here, the buyer's stuck there, and how do I get them not just to meet, how do I get them past each other and do that successfully? For me, that's a sport that I just never want to have end. And then the other one, which has become in vogue probably in the last 15 years, and that would be securing commissions. I love the constant grind. So one of the things I have in store for real estate rock stars, because I know, and whether you admit this or not, some of you are out there listing and selling properties and the volume is good, but you're finding yourself at times having to negotiate or create concessions in order to win business. Well, it's high on my agenda to share with you how we approach that and eliminate that stuff permanently. See, all we have to understand around commissions is that at the end of the day, it's consignment selling and just simple maxims that need to be put in play. The fee's always negotiable. I find this fascinating that real estate agents, when they hear the word negotiation, they always assume that this means down. When I talk to an owner, I say, yes, the fee is negotiable for the life of the listing. You are always in control of that negotiation by virtue of the fact that you're the person paying the money. So you're the judge of my performance. And if that performance is not something that meets with your expectation, well, you always have the power to renegotiate that fee. So why it is that you would possibly feel compromised, why it is that you would feel like you're being disadvantaged by us having that conversation is way beyond me. At this point in time, in and around the negotiation, and this is something I'll expand on as we get into this subject matter with great tenacity. In fact, one of the things I'll do is I had a conversation recently with a young real estate rock star on fee, and things were coming out of my mouth that I'd never heard before. And I've got that recording and I get that to you guys this week so you can actually have a listen to it. But my real push on fee these days goes well beyond all the clever dialogue and that sort of stuff. It's just a way of thinking. I look at a seller and I say, I just don't understand. We sell by way of consignment, which means we earn the fee and we only receive that fee that we've earned upon your approval. You see, until you approve of what you're going to receive, I don't get what I'm going to get. Surely, if you approve of what you're going to receive, you'll approve of what I'm going to get. At this point, however, at the beginning of the relationship, you are merely setting the incentive. And by setting the incentive, you should be maximizing that because you want it to be consistent with the maximum performance. But you always have the right to withdraw what you're offering and renegotiate that fee contingent on the service that you're going to receive. I mean, I love this stuff and I hope that we can develop, 30 years in real estate, never reduced a fee. And I want to share with you how I did that. And because it was not only me, I developed it into real estate officers inside of teams. We were by far and away the highest percentage in the area, and we never had any problems with it, and we were still able to do high volume. And I believe that environment is returning because the need for salespeople and the offerings that they can have is back there as well. So there it is. Those are the three things that I believe should be up there. Now, you might have other things. I would, for example, I have the writing of ads. I do enjoy writing ads. I would do it for nothing. I don't really talk about this too much, but I just find it fascinating because I love the challenge of getting the phone ringing. And I know that writing ads is not what you see today. That is just punching information out there. And I believe that's the sole problem, the reason they have issues with it. One of the things I'm very keen to develop, even in the video medium, is the full-length feature play that gives all the information. That should only be given to a buyer after they've viewed the property. You need to have a video commercial, if you like, that should be no more than about 15 seconds, that merely just looks good and sounds good and causes inquiry. And we need to capture that inquiry, because once you've got the inquiry, then you can work with it. And I've lost count over the years how many times I've sold a property to someone who on initial inquiry didn't really like it until I started to listen to their needs and wants and worked out that that was the one that they needed to see. That's something else that we'll work on. So that's ads, brochures. I know that some agents just love the idea of being involved in open for inspections and that sort of stuff, and we'll get to that in just a second. The second thing that you need to do, so in evaluating your performance, you need to look at the things that you absolutely love doing and would do irrespective of the climate. The second one is, what do you do under sufferance? So I say, what tasks do you perform reluctantly because it appears that no one else can do them as effectively as you? Now, recognize that we sometimes dupe ourselves into believing that sellers are listing with us because of something like this. It is a complete nonsense. I can talk about past real estate rock stars that we've had. You know, in New Zealand, I remember Shireen Burns used to always say to me, yeah, but how do I get other salespeople to do my open homes? I said, well, what do you mean? And she said to me, well, you know, I believe that my sellers list with me because they like the fact that I'm going to be at the open home. Well, if I was a seller, I'd like the fact that I was going to be at your open home as well. But this could prove to be the very thing that prevents high-end productivity, because I can't be at all the open homes. And if you're going to list and sell roughly 12 to 15 properties, you just can't be at all those open homes during a weekend. You just can't fit them in. So I said to her, no, you've got to move it over. And she said, well, do you know all the things that should be done and said as a bare minimum at an open for inspection? And she said, yes. She said, but how am I going to convince the owners of property, to accept the fact that I won't be conducting their open for inspections? And I said this to her, and I hope that you take this on board. I said, the same way that you got them to sign an agency agreement, sell them the idea, and just make the decision that you're not going to be involved in it, and resolve to teach the people that work with and support you how to do them effectively, accepting that they'll never do them as well as you do. One of the things I'm always explaining to leaders is you just have to accept that people won't always do things as well as or better than you. And this is where I make a very important point. You can see how this list is developing. So on this column, the first one, we're writing down all the things that we just love doing. And if you have a look at it, this should be where the productivity is occurring, in and around there. Yep. The second column, we're already starting to identify things that are getting in the way ahead of column one and can quite often be outsourced to somebody to do for you at a much more economical rate. So this leads me to the third question, which then forms the third column of your self-evaluation. And that is, what tasks do you loathe? What things do you do that happen? What things are you expected to do as a real estate salesperson that you just hate? Now, for me, as crazy as it might sound, atop of that list was showing buyers property and open for inspections as well, doing them. Now, I've always been fascinated by the fact that an open for inspection is an opportunity to create a virtual listing presentation. I've always been fascinated by the fact that I know that I don't have to look for sellers once I've got listings because my next sellers are already watching me. So I've always been fascinated with the concept of controlling the message that emanates from that listing because that creates leverage into the next one. Yes, but conducting them myself, I don't need to be there. I can be doing far more productive things or more pleasurable things for myself, and I can train people to do it. This is just an absurdity when I hear it. And I can explain this on the real estate rockstar level. One of the things I'm very keen to do on the management level is remove salespeople from the open homes altogether, because I reckon I could get the nice people that are like sales attendants in retail, like at your, say, David Jones or one of your big department stores over there in NZ, where, you know, they'll wear a uniform. They're happy to do that. They're quite economical to remunerate. They would love the idea of getting out and about and conducting open for inspections. And you could train them to do and say the things that you need to do and say in terms of creating a hospitable and welcoming customer service oriented environment. And the same thing could be achieved. The only point that the real estate sales professional needs to engage is once there's someone who's interested in the negotiation process. And they could also be trained to identify active property sellers. So to me, I felt quite liberated by just saying, I hate open homes. I felt quite liberated by saying, I just hate working with buyers. I love working with a buyer that's found something and they want to buy it and running the negotiation. I just can't stand the part where I'm taking them out to house after house after house that they don't like and they don't necessarily want. Now, this is not to cause some sort of ruckus in your environment. This is just to get you evaluating where you sit inside the equation. Can you see that if we can identify those tasks that you loathe, and then one of the other reasons you might not be good at them is because you might not like them is because you're just not good at it. So one of the reasons I discovered that I wasn't actually good with buyers is because I just wasn't very good at it. I wasn't very good at being all the niceties, you know, and putting up with the countless house after house. Have you got anything else and all that sort of stuff? I'm like, no, I'm just over it. But became completely energized when that listing was there. Now, this also allows you to start to identify, if you get a sales associate on board or someone that's supporting you, what you get them doing, because you can peel these things off as you recognize it. Another one was open homes. You know, eventually I had to let go of writing ads. I started to loathe doing that after a while. But then I looked at open homes and I said, well, hang on, I do like the fact that active property sellers are there and they lead to listings. Yeah. Prospecting, I hated that too, any form of traditional prospecting method, but recognized that I loved when I was talking to active property sellers. So I was great with that if I knew that they were actually doing something. So I started focusing on prospecting methods that were where the sellers were, or the probability of me running into a seller was much higher, and it started to make sense. And then finally, what do you crave? Is it time off? Is it the whole time on, time off? When you're having time on, time off, are you where you need to be? You see, folks, here's what I know, and so I can share with you 30 years into this business, having seen it all. Here's the important point that you really want to grasp around this. You see, before you can take anything new on, you have to let go of a couple of things. So before you can take something on, you have to let go of things in the past. You have to repack your bags. And that's what I was talking about here last time. I think that's what's needed right now. I think a significant change in this environment is upon us. And what you need to do is open up your baggage, get rid of the shit that you don't need, and repack your bags with only the things that you need to take you forward. And then you can start to embrace this concept properly. You see, once you understand what you're good at, then you can start to fix it up. And I always remember this story. I always remember watching this film with U2 and BB King was going to play with them, and they were rehearsing. And all of a sudden, halfway through the song, Bono stops and explains that this is how the tune goes. And then he says, it's through this particular part, these are the chords. And BB King went into a state of apoplexy. He just looked at him and he said, I don't do chords. I said, what do you mean? He said, I just don't do chords. Now, this is one of the greatest blues guitarists that ever walked the face of the earth, freaking out about having to play a guitar progression, a chord progression. And Bono's looking at him, just couldn't figure out what's going on. And he says, okay, it's okay, it's okay. He looks over to Edge, he says, Edge will handle the chords. And BB King all of a sudden calmed down and said, that's cool, I don't do chords. I think this is the same. I think that you have to evaluate to figure out what you're good at and just let go of things that don't matter anymore. Have the courage to say, I don't do this. For me, I don't do open for inspections. Now, you can't go and do that if you've just started out, and you have to know that you have to do enough of them to know that you don't want to do them, and you have to do enough of them to be able to instruct someone else to do them. But it is about eventually letting go before you can embrace and then move forward. Once you get that evaluation in place, once you've identified all this, we can then start to take the very next step, and that is to start to eliminate those things that are getting in the way of our productivity, where you can start to fulfill your capacity and you can actually get to the point where you are blending your career with your lifestyle and there's no further demarcation, and you can move into the space of being a real live real estate rock and roller. Love to hear from you. So you can contact me, Mark with a K, at realestaterockstar.com.au, or you can phone me on my mobile, +61 410 592 165. And hopefully I look forward to talking again with you next week. Or if you're listening to this on audio, I look forward to being in your car and in your ear for just about every week, week on week, as we help develop your career from sales professional to peak performance sales pro, and you move into that space of being a real estate rock and roller. Thanks for joining us.